Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I'm your host, Perry. Super excited to have you all back with me this week. Can't wait for you all to hear this interview with Seth from Broken Barrel Spirits here in just a bit as well. If you are new to the show, thank you so much for checking it out. If you are returning, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for coming back. If you have not yet, please subscribe to the show, share it with your friends, leave us a 5-star rating and review. We'll, of course, read it out at the end of every episode. Well, not every episode. We'll switch it up. If there's a review, it's complicated, I know. But if you have a new review, we'll read it out. Anyway, it really helps the show. Gets other people listening to the show. It gets us up in the iTunes charts. All that good stuff. If you have not checked out all of our apparel and merchandise, it's bourbonshop.threadless.com. If you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, we are on our way to 1,000. We are getting so close to 1,000 subs. I think we're just about 70 away as of recording this. And also patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast for as little as $1 a month. You can help support the show. $5 gets you some bonus content as well. And good stuff. And you are also going to want to be on the Patreon here over the next month or so with some very big, fun news about our next barrel pick. That is coming up very soon, y'all. And that's all I'm going to say about it. That's all I'm going to say about it for now. Hey, we'll do a couple of what we've been drinking recently before we get on to the interview. Oh, a few weeks ago now at this point. And I've just been so happy to come home to it. I did a stream with Russell's Reserve 13-year cast strength, and I freaking love this bottle so much. I have to dose it out in very small pours to myself, so I don't go too crazy, but it is such a great bottle, and I can't wait to get another. I'm just so ready to get another bottle already. And I have also been drinking on just the classic Elijah Craig small batch, just the 94 proof, man. It's so good to kind of come home and have something that you can kind of know what you're getting into, and it's a very familiar yet complex pour. And I definitely need to do a video on my thoughts about Elijah Craig sometime soon. Maybe that'll be the next video. Maybe I'll talk about Elijah Craig and do a little review of it. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the interview. Can't wait to get into this with you all today. I'm super happy to be welcoming to the show the founder of Infused Spirits. Ladies and gentlemen, Seth. Is it pronounced Benheim?
Got it. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. I'm like, that puts me at like 50% on names over the past couple of weeks. So
you pronounce it better than I do.
Seth, how are you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to get into these whiskeys with you and talk about the history of your company, how it all started, and just kind of bring everybody up to speed on what's going on with you guys right now and what you guys have on the docket for the future. But one of the things I like to do, not just with my co-hosts, but with people who are guesting on the show, is ask them, what have you been drinking recently? So is there anything you've been drinking recently?
Oh, it's a wonderful question. Last night I was drinking a little Glenfarclas 105. It's a 120 proof Scotch whiskey. And this past weekend, which was the 4th of July, I had a little Jillian. It's a beer from Goose Island that comes in a 750 ml. Delicious. I enjoyed the Jillian very much. And these are just like, what am I drinking lately? That's kind of the last two things I remember drinking. And I did try some new Broken Barrel samples recently that I enjoyed, but I can't share what they were because they're not out yet, and I gotta keep it a secret. We're not gonna push for anything that we can't talk about on the podcast. That's for you guys to no worries
to discuss.
There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly, man.
We'll stick with those.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into what it is that you guys do at Infuse, and in some ways how Broken Barrel came to be as well. But you guys have been around basically in some form or function since 2012, right?
Yeah, 2012 is like the year I quit my job, posted up in my grandmother's garage at the age of 24, and started tinkering with some vodka. And then 2014 was the year we started, we actually launched a vodka product called Infused Spirits. And 2015, we got some investments, got out of the garage, got a paycheck. So I'd say 2015 was when we were a company, like a formal company with operating agreements and those kinds of things that real companies have. Not just me with a bank account and a checkbook and a roof over my head at my grandma's house. So certainly came along by 2015. And the whiskey 2017 was the first year we put out a whiskey called Infused Spirits Broken Barrel Bourbon. And that was a sort of foray into whiskey. We did about 500 cases. We pre-sold the whole batch, and we said, okay, this is good. Let's keep going. And thank God we did, because flash forward almost 4 years later, it hasn't quite been 4 years yet. We've got quite a nice little whiskey business. And being a whiskey fanatic, for those just listening, you can't see, but there's a lot of whiskey behind me. People that see me on Zoom are like, oh, this guy's really into booze, really into whiskey.
I love having that as a backdrop. We were talking about before we were recording my bar, and it's most of the bottles that are on there are currently being hidden behind Snuffleupagus, but that's a conversation for a different time. But yeah, it is kind of.
Is that what that is? I thought that was a plant.
Yeah, that's Snuffy back there.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It has to do with the live streams and whatnot. But he's like the patron saint of our live stream show.
He's part of the podcast.
He is. He's very much our little mascot. Which I could probably get in a lot of trouble with HBO and Sesame Street, of course, over that. But he hasn't shown up on any merch yet.
You paid for the Snuffleupagus toy, so I think you can do whatever you want with it after that, right?
Fair. Until my daughter takes it from me, which will happen inevitably. So
there you go.
But let's talk about the inception behind Infused Spirits. Of course, vodka is one of, and I mean this with absolutely no disrespect, the easier ways to get into the spirits industry.
Absolutely.
So was whiskey always kind of in the foreview, the front view, I guess? Or was that just kind of something that came along? And I guess why vodka at first?
It's a great question. Infused Spirits was always predicated on the process of real, natural, single bottle infusions. So literally single bottle, like the infusion takes place in each physical bottle, independent of the bottle before and after it, with the possibility of one bottle varying from the next. Each one is a unique individual infusion. So Infused Spirits, the company, the concept from day one was, we're going to build a spirits company that focuses on this process. And from day one, everything was on the table. So you had infused vodka, infused gin, infused bitters, infused bourbon, infused rum, tequila, you name it. I bought all the domain names on the same day as we bought the vodka. So everything was always on the table. The vodka was the obvious choice because then and still today, infusions, when someone thinks of what alcohol is going to be infused, it's typically vodka.
Right.
And vodka infusions date back to early accounts of vodka consumption in Russia and Poland. And it's totally a common practice in a lot of countries, including the US, for doing homemade infusions, like, behind the bar, at home, that sort of thing. So it's a natural fit. If you were to Google trend search what consumers are looking to infuse, infused vodka has like 100 times more search results or people searching for that than infused whiskey or other categories. Wow. It is the number one infusion concept or curiosity of people. So it was a natural fit. That's why we did vodka first.
Was it product that you had, and don't want to get you in trouble, but was it product that you made in your grandma's garage, or did you source it? Okay.
No. We've never, it's not like a bathtub gin kind of thing.
Sure.
Or any moonshining. I can safely say I have never distilled a single bottle, barrel, anything of any spirit ever. I have never distilled or even tried to once. And I don't mean that like I never will. I actually own a still here at our facility in downtown Los Angeles. We have a 26-gallon pot still. I have yet to use it, and I would let my employees turn it on way before I ever would. I'm more of a marketing and branding and blending force for the company rather than an actual technical or scientific chemist of any kind to start messing around with distillation, and I'll probably blow up the building if I touch it. So, but that aside, no, the concept was always to be sourcing our vodka, which pretty much, very, very few companies distill their own vodka. It is a very inexpensive thing to purchase, to redistill, even if you have a still. So and with our whiskey as well, we do not distill our own whiskey. We find fantastic partners, bottlers, and we apply our process. So where we come in is we cut, prep, break, chop, peel fruit to our specifications, our recipe, and then we taught manufacturing facilities how to put our recipes together and actually prepare and process the real fruit ingredients. We had to get certain storage modifications done to house, air conditioning room for fruit and refrigeration and cooling boxes and all these different types of equipment to make sure we were containing the fruit correctly. So the fruit processing was something that we really had to sit down and figure out that part. And that was all for the vodka, of course.
What's your background in?
I've been doing this pretty much. I was right out of college. I lived in Arizona for a year. After college, I went to U of A, and then moved back to Los Angeles. And about a year after that, I started the company. So been doing this for the last 9.5 years.
So, this has always been something, even as you were, in the infant stages of the company, it was kind of almost a no-brainer for you in terms of, making something your own, as opposed to jumping on board with somebody else's brand or somebody else's product.
Yeah, I've been entrepreneurial since I was, I'd say 19. At 19, I started an online marketing business in Tucson where I would sell furniture on Craigslist for these, mom and pop furniture stores. And it got bigger and bigger. And I was basically running the entire thing through Craigslist and using the word Craigslist and the likeness of Craigslist to the point where I got a cease and desist from Craigslist.
Oh no!
I was like, this stack, like this huge packet shows up in the mail, and Craigslist basically said that you broke every single term of use that you click accept when you try to sell something on Craigslist. I had people in India using VoIP software to move the mouse and keyboard for a series of desktop computers that were hooked up to a monitor switch. And I could check on each of the different people in Pakistan and India and all that.
Holy crap.
Check on the monitors and see that they were all posting 24 hours a day in Tucson because they had an IP, they had a firewall. So you couldn't actually post an ad from India. you had to be in Tucson to post in Tucson.
Right.
So I set up a wall of computers with the monitor switch. It was hysterical. We were selling cars, we were renting houses, we were selling appliances, furniture, motorcycles. I've sold art. I think the biggest, I sold a condo. I think I sold like a $500,000 condo
Jeez.
to somebody. And I was like 20. The commission was really good on that. And I actually ended up buying a house with my parents. We went in together on a house right after the 2008 deal. So that was kind of fun. It was cool.
Dang.
A lot of experience in college. So yeah, entrepreneurial. I always wanted to do my own thing.
That is, I don't know. Whatever I was expecting you to answer that question with, it was not
that.
I almost had Craigslist sue me for a lot of money.
Yeah, I spent a good deal of time, because by the time I got that cease and desist, we were like, I had already shut it down, moved to LA. And so I had to spend a lot of time like sending them links or screenshots, I should say, of me having closed all of these different accounts. Because I had my dad's a doctor, and as a joke, I was like, Dad, look, I'm not going to go to medical school, but I created this thing called Dr. Craigslist. And so I'm sure if you scour the internet for Seth Benheim, Dr. Craigslist, you could find something. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like a stethoscope coming through like a computer monitor. I'm like, Dad, I'm a doctor. He's like, no, yeah. It was funny.
That's incredible, dude.
We were wild. We were crazy. I had college students working for me. We were like all doing it together. I had like a pyramid scheme going.
It all sounds like the incubator in Silicon Valley.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's got that same kind of like I guess he's got the right intentions, but it feels a little bit weird and like
Yeah, it was a fun couple of years of messing around with the computers and doing that. But
yeah,
no, it was fine. It was certainly a good experience. I enjoyed the entrepreneurial aspects of it, and certainly if that hadn't happened, I'm sure we would not be sitting here talking today.
Yeah, so, of course.
One thing leads to the next, and I got a taste for it, and I enjoyed it, and I certainly set out to do my own thing. Not long after that.
Yeah, I'd say so. When did whiskey come into the mix for you? When did spirits come into the mix for you? I mean, was it always something that you had on the side as kind of a passion or a love for, and then once the entrepreneurial stuff came about, then you sought out to do something with it, or was it just something that seemed like a good fit that you kind of wanted to make happen with what you were already doing?
I had a sort of draw to alcohol from a young age, so I had the fake ID in high school and all that, and that worked to my advantage. And I pretty much have looked like this forever. I don't think my face has changed much since I was 16 or 17. So
sure,
I had the full black beard and all that. So yeah, no, it's been a fake ID. And then I would say in college, there was a year there where I worked all summer and took all my money and went to, I was in California that summer, went to Bevmo, and I bought with my fake ID still, like every color, spirit, alcohol you can imagine. So I was just pretty much, I was getting into it. That was when I was really getting into it. I was making cocktails. At the time, I thought I might want to get into like bartending or something. It was all sort of on the table at that point. So that was maybe when I really started taking interest in alcohol and packaging and pricing and all that kind of stuff. And then when I had the concept for Infuse, I still kept my other job. I had a job at the time, and I was working at a desk and doing sales from aerospace metal. Didn't really enjoy that. Pretty much the only job I've ever really had. Aside from this one. And, that one, while I was doing that, I was daydreaming about, this infusion concept.
Yeah.
And I would get up from my desk and go to the liquor store or the grocery store, And I wanted to see if anyone else was doing it. So I kept checking and checking and checking, and I was online and searching and searching. And the more I didn't find something, the more money I would put away because I wasn't deterred, until I saved up about like $5,000 to go and, put some samples together and start buying a bunch of different vodkas and a bunch of fruit and a bunch of clear bottles and wine bottles, and figuring out the tinkering, made some samples. And then I met a guy from Scotland who was doing Scotch whiskey importing for a couple companies like Trader Joe's and Costco, and he was in the private label business. And I pitched him, I presented him the concept for Infuse, and he loved it. And he was the first person I ever talked to about it, and I showed it to him, and I have been working with him ever since. I talk to him almost every week, if not every couple of weeks now, and he just opened my eyes to what could be. I mean, I think I took a hint from him because he walked into his place 2012 and he had a wall of whiskey himself. And I was like, damn, I want that. And he had his car and a nice house and this and that. I'm like, okay, this is a guy I can work with. And, I think after I met him, we had a couple more meetings, and he said, the Infuse thing is great. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we won't. But regardless, I like you. I want to work with you. I put in my 2 weeks the next day. I woke up the next day and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go work with that guy. It was just this moment. The minute he said, I don't know what we're going to do, but I want to work with you, I said, you know what? I will take a chance and go work with him.
That's incredible, man.
And that was it. I never looked back. It was the best decision I think I ever made.
What kind of influence did he have on the whiskey creation of Broken Barrel?
Tons. Even though we were doing the vodka, when I met him, he was letting me drink 30, 40, 50-year-old scotches. I was 24. I even once dropped a bottle of 40-year-old scotch on the floor in the parking lot right before a sales meeting. So that was a rough moment. He looked at me and he goes, that whiskey's older than you are, son. So, it was crazy. Working with him, I was a fanatic, and I worked with his son for many years after that. He kind of worked alongside me, and we would drive around LA, hawking cases out of the back of his son's Mercedes, to bars and restaurants and liquor stores. And we actually got a decent amount of, business and some pretty high profile accounts in Los Angeles. And we were, at one point in time, we were literally storing like tens of thousands of dollars of single malt scotch in my grandmother's garage to pull samples from. Totally not legal either, but this is almost 10 years ago. It was really fun. But all the while we were building Infuse, I was around scotch, so it certainly played a part. That the owner of that company did not play a huge role in Broken Barrel so much. I think my Infused Spirits team really got together, and we all sort of had these ideas around what we were going to do for the Infused Spirits whiskey. I certainly took him every sample of every batch and got his sort of seal of approval. But no, and then I think once we had done, we actually we called it Broken Barrel and we used the broken staves, but it wasn't until the second year, 2018, that we really said, okay, if we're gonna break barrels, let's do it right. Let's get the hammers. Let's show us breaking the barrels. And so if you go to brokenbarrelwhiskey.com, you can actually watch what we do.
Yeah.
So rather than just buying barrels that were already broken, we decided we wanted to do the breaking ourselves. And so it was the second, third, fourth batch that we started smashing everything with sledgehammers, getting it on camera and really promoting it that way and collecting the staves. And yeah, there's a bit of theater to it, but there's no substitution or shortcut. I mean, we literally take barrels, break them up, and put them into the whiskey, and that creates what we call the oak bill. And that's probably one of the more important topics to cover is the idea behind an oak bill versus like a mash bill.
Yeah. So
So,
yeah, definitely. Let's back up a little bit so we can talk about the inception itself of Broken Barrel. And I mean, you basically already touched on it. It's a very literal name.
yeah,
as far
they
as
both are. They both are. We do that. Infused spirit. But what is it? Well, it's an infused spirit.
Yeah. So
Real.
Broken Barrel whiskey is whiskey made from barrels that you have literally broken with a hammer, with a sledgehammer. But
Exactly.
that as you've been saying, I mean, that wasn't the initial inception or the initial idea. What differed then as opposed to what you're doing now?
No, really. I mean, it was the idea to use barrels that had been broken, because if you think about one concept, everything was supposed to be infused, so that when we were trying to keep to that concept or adhere to the sort of rules we set for ourselves about what we are, what we do as a company and as a brand. But in the same breath, we weren't actually doing single bottle infusions. We don't put the oak in the bottle. We do it
Right.
on a much larger batch scale, which is what we don't do on the vodka. So there was already, from the first batch and the first concept, a deviation from the norm with Broken Barrel. So when we created it, we're just like, it's an infusion, so it can be called infused. But by year 2, we were already thinking, maybe this is its own thing. Let's really lean into this Broken Barrel and make that the name. And so one thing led to another, a few conversations with the right people, and we really saw the light and decided, okay, this is Broken Barrel. This is not infused spirits. And even though you could call it an infusion, I think the industry term everyone knows is a finish. It's a finishing. So it's stave finished, stave macerated. You can say it's stave infused, but yeah, we're using Broken Barrel staves to literally submerge those into batches of whiskey. So you have, if you look at if you think about an oak stave, you got the inside, the outside, the sides, the tops and bottoms. You have all these different surfaces in contact. So you have this sort of seasoned oak element going on because the outside of the barrel has been exposed to bacteria and elements and dirt and this and that. And so it's got all these different flavor components in there. Some good, some bad, and you really want to treat the barrels a little bit before you put them in the whiskey.
Sure.
But you're also going to filter everything out, and you're doing it at a high proof. You're going to add a little water, bring it down to the right proof if it's not a cask strength. So those are all factored in. And then we use different types of barrels. We thought it was really, really neat from the very, very first batch to use sherry cask, French oak, and ex-bourbon barrels in tandem with a specific ratio of 20% sherry cask, 40% French oak, 40% ex-bourbon barrels. And that's literally the count of the staves.
Yeah.
And depending on the batch size, it's more or less number of staves per type.
Right.
But that is the oak bill. So you think about a mash bill, like, oh, this is a 21% rye, 9% malted barley bourbon. Well, our whiskey is a 40 oak bill. And then we had the California oak, which you may or may not have tried already. And that is an 80-20 mash bill.
Yeah.
80% Cabernet oak barrels, 20% French oak. So you have different things happening, and every bottle has the oak bill and the mash bill listed out on it very clearly. We want everyone to know exactly what's in the whiskey.
Before I get to what I just tasted, I want to ask you too. It is though being aged or rested in a new charred oak barrel, right?
Yes, we take bourbon that's aged the same way all bourbons are. New charred oak, 51% corn, and ours is Kentucky bourbon and Kentucky rye for that matter. So grain to glass, 100% done in Owensboro, Kentucky, at Green River Distilling.
I was going to say I didn't think there were any other distilleries in Owensboro.
Well, there's a facility that's owned by Sazerac that does bottling, but not, I don't believe, much whiskey. But oddly, it's in Owensboro.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it. It starts with a G, I think. But it's just a bottling facility.
So this, I want to take this and, as it is apparently appropriate, break it down a little bit more as well. So
well said.
So this 88 proof California bourbon.
Yes. California Oak,
Kentucky bourbon.
That's right.
My bad. Right. I apologize.
You got it.
Thank you for clarifying that, though. So
if people get confused, because I'm here in Los Angeles, the distillery's in Kentucky, the vodka's getting made in Vegas, and we're touching a lot of facilities in a lot of states, and so people get a little turned around. They go, "Where the hell are you from? Like, what are you guys doing?" It's like, well, I know it's confusing, but don't worry. Just read the label.
It'll be all right. Yeah.
It's all on there.
So this is a 2-year-old at least bourbon, right?
The bourbons, the California Oak straight bourbon, the rye, the one you're trying is not a straight rye. So it has younger than 2-year-old in it. But starting August 1st, they will all be straight bourbons and straight ryes. So everything, yes, will be 2 years.
Well, this one actually is listed as at least 2
California
years.
Oak.
So
California Oak is.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood.
California Oak. Yeah, sorry. So it's a little confusing, and I apologize to you and the listener. California Oak.
They'll catch up.
Is straight bourbon. Our small batch 95 proof has not been straight bourbon to date. Our cask strength bourbon has not been straight bourbon to date, and our rye has not been straight rye to date. That is changing August 2021.
That's awesome.
There's enough of it that we can start upping the age based on the inventories and pricing and everything going on at Green River. Again, while they are big, they are still small relative to other, big players.
Yeah.
And they're new. They really only started. They got their feet going. They started laying down barrels in 2016, a year before we came along. So when we started the company, there was only 1-year-old. That was it. And we barely got much of it. We only got 500 bottles or cases, I mean.
Jeez.
So it's not a lot that we could access in the early days. There's a lot more available now.
So that you answered basically what my question was going to be, which was, are we going to see older product eventually? And, that's a question that we tend to ask a lot of these smaller distilleries, craft distilleries, smaller NDPs as well, just depending on how quick they need their turnaround to be, how much of an investment they might have, and how much capital they need to, bring back in. So I know that places like, Wilderness Trail and New Riff already have, 4-year bottled and bond products, 6-year products as well. I mean, is something like a 4-year bottled and bond in the works for you guys as well?
I do not believe we have any plans to put out a bottled and bond. That's not, when you see new products come to market for us, there'll be new categories or really ridiculous oaks or one-off limited edition products.
Yeah.
We're not going to straddle the market with a regular bourbon and a cask strength bourbon and a California oak bourbon and a bottled and bond. Like, we don't need 12 bourbons. Yeah. And we're not a bourbon, but we're a whiskey company with a really unique, one-of-a-kind process, level of transparency. The term oak bill is registered to us. We trademarked it. Like, we've got a lot going on with that. Yeah. So what you'll see are extremely cool collaborations. Like, we're doing a Modern Times brewery collaboration. We did a great collaboration with I'm blanking, Tabula Rasa from Second Chance Brewery.
Nice.
We have a brewery in Minnesota we're working with. You're going to see a lot of beer collaborations, and we take those old stout barrels and we break them up and put them into the bourbons. And we do that at 115 proof generally. That's been really, really fun. So, and those are like unique made to order items that you'll see with retailers that buy entire barrels worth at a time. And that's a program that we run. We actually have a name for it, which I can tell you is called the Reserve Oak Series. And that's where you'll find, for our Reserve Oaks, that's where you'll find the more expensive products like port finish, peach brandy cask finish, rum and rye cask finished bourbon. Those things are probably a little more challenging to find. We've done several of those with our online retail partner Flaviar and Caskers.com.
Nice. Yeah.
So we work with them on some really cool stuff. A lot more in the works actually with them that I can tell you guys. We will be putting out some really neat projects with them. We're doing a barrel pick with Bourbon Pursuit. You can look that one up on YouTube. Those
awesome.
guys, Kenny picked the barrel. So those are some of the more unique things. But the 4 items you're trying, those are our everyday, always available, priced to be drank as often as you possibly can, or shared, or gifted, or
Sure.
We're trying to create an everyday whiskey brand that you can go back to again and again and again. That is just a little different in taste and in style and in attitude, I would say, than your everyday Kentucky bourbon. We're just not like the other brands.
Yeah.
Why our rye whiskey is called a heresy. We're just not like the everyday company.
So having just had the California Oak, at 88 proof, it has one of the thickest mouthfeels I have ever experienced on a sub 90 proof bourbon. Just hands down. It was coating. It had a really nice oiliness to it as well. And I was really blown away by the fact that, it had this much depth of flavor at 2 years at 88 proof, of course. But I think that, and it just goes to show that this process that you guys have pioneered is giving bourbon drinkers something else as opposed to what we've seen be unsuccessful in terms of experimentation, smaller barrels, hyper aging, things like that. And this, I like this approach so much better. And it just seems to create a better outcome than, using a half size barrel or, putting it in Texas. But
I can't knock. I have some Texas whiskey that I absolutely adore. I've got some 15 and 30 gallon whiskeys that I can't speak highly enough about. And maybe I'm with you on the hyper aging stuff, like the blasting it with light or pressure cooking it or those kinds of things. Like, I'm less enthused about those as I am about the other two, types or processes or terroirs, as you want to call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But again, I'm also a bit of a fanatic in that I'll drink, whiskey from the Netherlands or India, or Israel or Australia, or I'll drink whiskey from all over the planet. So I love doing that too, by the way.
I'm not a Kentucky purist by any means. I wanted to clarify. I mean, I'm from Kentucky. I was born in Lexington. I'm still here pretty much. Yeah. And it's just, Kentucky bourbon is very much a part of who I am. But once I started experiencing the whiskeys that didn't come from Kentucky, or the whiskeys that inspired those that were made in Kentucky, then everything kind of started to fall into place. And then I started to identify and be able to see the broader picture and really have an appreciation for it and an enjoyment for it. And also, there are some Texas whiskeys that I absolutely love. I don't want to give the wrong impression here. It's just
there's tons of Texas whiskeys. Just really so different. Mm-hmm. That was like not an elegant statement, but it's okay. Texas whiskey, so different. He's a poet. He's
got all the best words.
I got all the best words. There we go. And I'm not even drinking right now. This is wonderful. No, man, it's fun. I mean, I think that's the joy of being involved in the whiskey industry and having whiskey collections and those things. Is you get to experience and taste all these different products that were made with different intentions and different processes. And it's really been eye-opening as a podcast host myself and someone that reviews and tastes different spirits professionally outside of this company entirely. And that's been extremely eye-opening, especially this past year and a half, where we were kind of locked inside for a little while there, and getting to still connect with people all over the world through Zoom and do these kind of like interviews and tastings. It was the best, absolutely the best experience. And I think had the pandemic not happened, I'm not necessarily sure the experiences would have been quite the same or have happened at all for that matter.
You are not the first person to have said that to me over the past few episode recordings, past few months, really. And it's hard not to find some way to justify finding light in the horrible extreme darkness that was last year when none of us were happy and we were all stuck inside and couldn't go see our friends and everything.
Yeah.
And the more and more that I talk to people, it seems just more and more like we're all trying our best to be as optimistic about it. What did 2020 do for you both on both ends of the spectrum? Not just for, bringing about a closer sense of community, but also, how did that kind of change you and your outlook? And also on the flip side of
business wise, or like
business and personal, personal.
Well, personal is easy. I had a baby last year, my first. I had my daughter, so that
we had our first kid too.
Yeah, November 29th.
Oh, we beat you, October 15th.
There you go. Yeah, that's my wedding anniversary, actually, October 15th.
No kidding! Yeah. Holy crap, man!
Yeah, those are both great dates. So,
amen.
That was, just going through last year, wondering if I'm going to get to go to the hospital to be there for my wife. That was certainly, checking the news every day and applying for PPP loans and crap like that, all interesting. And, the personal experiences of doing that was, all over the map, man. There was some, and the podcasting was great, the wonders of direct-to-consumer business has been really eye-opening and changed my outlook a lot from the year before where, I don't know if we were even talking about DTC in 2019 and 2018. And it comes up every meeting now and with everybody I talk to for this company and others. And it's just a big topic of conversation right now as we look, forward into 22 and on.
Yeah.
I'm not really giving you like positive or negative. I'm just giving you just stuff.
No. It's all part of the story. You don't have to keep everything black and white. I mean, do as you fit.
I'm trying to think of like what the hell happened last year. No, I mean a
lot of stuff happened last year.
A lot. It's right. Like a lot of stuff happened last year, but also like a lot didn't happen. Like it was kind of minus the scares of like people getting sick and they're like, oh shit, what's going to happen to them? Knock on wood, luckily everyone I know in my family that did get sick came out of it just fine, including like my grandfather who's in his 80s. People ended up that around me, thank God, people lucky, no one got too sick or anything beyond that. So yeah, that was probably one of the best positives, that and my daughter. And on a negative side, I mean, I'm sure there were some negative things beyond just what was the state of the world, but, I wish we could have gotten out more on a business side and just seen more customers and been able to, keep the business at the levels we wanted it. And I think that's true of every craft spirits company. I mean, I read somewhere the average craft spirits company lost 50% of their sales. So yeah, that was not the case for us. We managed to do far better than that. So that's another positive, but certainly didn't do as well as we had hoped, which is, I guess, the negative. So, but we'll take that. We'll take it. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, that was, I think that's how a lot of us in this field, in this industry felt. We were like, because I was incredibly positive going into 2020.
Yeah.
And
roaring 20's my ass, right?
I was like, this is going to be the best year of the podcast. In mid-February, we found out we were going to have a baby, and it was just like, I can't imagine things are going to, take a turn for the worse. And sure enough, it was, it was weird, but we made it through just fine. But I think that for those of us who have a positive outlook on how last year went, it almost felt like proof that at a very core level, the human spirit is indomitable. And for those of us that persevered and found ways to make it happen, even if it wasn't the most ideal situation. I mean, I in some ways, I feel very fortunate to have gone through 2020.
Yeah, it's a year that we will be talking about for many, many years to come. So
we can bring it back around to the whiskey now. I apologize, but I had to get the perspective.
It comes up naturally and often, so it's just how conversations go. So, what are you drinking now?
So I've kind of tasted through everything, but I'm coming back now to the small batch bourbon.
Yeah, 95
at the
proof.
moment. Yeah, 95 proof. About a year old. Some extra in there as well.
No, at least 1 year old. Up to 3 for those blends. No older than anything. Than that age.
So again, we're talking about this oak bill that you guys have trademarked. This is 40% ex-bourbon, 40% French oak, 20% sherry cask. And I think that's the same thing on the rye as well.
The rye and the cask strength are the same oak bill, all 3 of them.
Gotcha.
And all 3 of the bourbons have the same mash bill, which is 70% corn, 21% rye, 9% malted barley.
How much of a different taste testing of mash bills did you all do before you settled on this high rye mash bill?
We tasted a few different ones. Actually, our first batch 1, was a different mash bill. It was, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I know it was 4% malted barley. It was 70. Oh God, no, I'm blanking. I think it was 71% corn, 25%.
Man.
Right? 25.4. 71, 25.4. That adds up.
Man.
Yeah.
It does add up.
Yeah, so it was about half the amount of malted barley in the current mash bill. So, I mean, again, 5%, 9%, sorry, 4%, 9%, not the end of the world. But yeah, it was a 71, 25, 4.
Was that a change out of necessity or a conscious one that you all made?
I think it was an availability one. They said we can't.
Oh, okay.
We're not running this mash bill much longer. We want to switch you guys if you're amenable to it. We'd like to see if you go for this 70-21. This is what we've been producing for the last year, and this is what we want to continue producing. There are wheated mash bills out of Owensboro that I have not explored. Again, I'm less interested in exploring mash bills. I think there are plenty of companies that do a phenomenal job at that, along with a lot of other levers that you can pull in making whiskey.
Absolutely.
Coming up with different, labels, like bottled and bond, for example. Like there's so many levers you can pull. And for us, I feel like we have our hands full just in producing with different levers of different oaks. I mean, I could launch a whiskey, call it the Reserve Series, and do 70% sherry, 15 French, 15 ex-bourbon. And even though all the elements going into it are the same, the ratios are different, and the resulting whiskey is going to be way sweeter and way fruitier and way more, robust. Maybe not as long of a finish, way less of that oak flavor that you get on that 95 proof. But if all else was equal, it's still a totally different product just by pulling the levers of the oak bill. So I'd rather focus on the oak bill than the mash bill, quite frankly. And this year, I can also announce that we will do an American whiskey, which is going to be fun.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to put some stuff in there. It's going to have some bourbon in the blend. It's also going to have some corn whiskey and possibly some light whiskey.
Great.
I love light whiskey. I think it's a really fun product.
Yeah.
Specifically because light whiskey has all the body and backbone of a good, and it's much cheaper than whiskey than bourbon to buy by the barrel.
Yeah.
And so I can get some older whiskeys that really, they don't have much flavor, but they got a lot of feel, a lot of mouth feel because of their age. Very similar to a younger Scotch that's been 5, 6, 7 years. Not a lot of flavor, but lots of mouthfeel still from being in the barrel that long. It really takes a long time when you're in a used barrel to pick up any really good flavors. But we've got an oak bill. So you slap an oak bill with it, and suddenly the flavor is like not a problem, not an issue at all. So now you're combining flavor with feel, and you can get a really nice whiskey out of that. And the amount of flavor that's picked up when you've got light whiskey in the blend, it is super fascinating to watch a whiskey just mature and evolve that quickly because of the surface area of the oak and all that. It's just a really, really nice thing. So I'm super excited to get into American whiskey. Ours is going to be 100 proof, 50%, and that will be coming out this fall, sometime either September or October. And we're just working out the kinks of where it'll be for sale. But we will announce that. So definitely follow us at Broken Barrel Whiskey on Instagram, where we usually make most of our big announcements.
Yeah. So let's talk about, because you said it yourself, you wanted to focus on the oak bill. So I want to break down the oak bill a little bit as well. Two things I'm curious about. One, there is kind of this pushback on whether or not bourbons that undergo this sort of treatment can be called bourbons in the community at the moment. And folks like Wade Woodard, of course, is a big proponent of trying to be more clear about it. Lloyd Christmas on Twitter too, who I'm sure you've seen.
Remind me, what was his comment?
So there's this.
I don't have Twitter, by the way. So
no. Okay, sure. Yeah. So it might not be directed at you all, but when we take somebody like Maker's Mark, who is doing the oak finishing staves, for 46 or all of their private selects, it's the conversation of whether or not it's truly still bourbon. And it doesn't sound like, to me, the label of that is hugely important to you all, as long as you're putting out really good product.
There isn't much of an opinion in my view, because the government tells you exactly what you can and can't call it, right? The government, if you read our label, it says Broken Barrel Whiskey Company. And I've got the new label in front of me. It's a new bottle.
Ooh.
I'll show you.
Yeah, it looks great.
It says Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey finished with Broken Barrel staves. And it has to say exactly that in the same font, in the same sentence, without any sort of, I can't increase the size of the word bourbon. I can't trick people into thinking this is bourbon. It's as a sentence, this is Broken Barrel California Oak, full stop, period. And what that is a Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey finished with Broken Barrel staves. They make it incredibly challenging to say anything other than exactly that, which
Yeah.
matches exactly the recipe or formula you submit to the government as well. And I can't use the word whiskey or bourbon anywhere else on the label because they're very damn clear that this, while it's made with bourbon, it may not technically be bourbon, even though it's just a stave finish.
Right.
And believe it or not, if it were barrel finish, which is the biggest joke of all, if it were barrel finish, like if I put it from one barrel into another barrel,
Yeah.
I could word it and phrase it and show it on the label differently. Can you believe that? The fact that I break the barrels and put them in versus putting the whiskey into another barrel changes the entire framework in which I can label my product. So it's kind of crazy.
Part of me is just kind of like, yeah, it makes sense that the government has done that. They're just trying to, make it as difficult as possible for you to, be clear.
100%.
It just, you would think that there would be a big enough overlap to where you wouldn't have to change the verbiage so much in that sense. But I mean, it's cool to me. I mean, just to kind of hear that sense of like, I don't care. It's like I mean, we've got it taken care of, man. Like we're just doing what we're doing.
It's not made with vodka or gin.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
I mean, it's Kentucky distilled, fermented, aged barrel bourbon.
Right.
And then we put a bunch of staves into the tank.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, if you want to get into like arguments or get into confusion, here's a bottle of Baron-Jäger. It's from Germany.
I don't want to have any kind of argument, man.
Look at that.
That's bizarre that it's from Germany.
This is Baron-Jäger German liqueur made with honey and bourbon. How it can even have the word bourbon on it with or underneath the word imported honey bourbon. It says it on the label in this little tag. It says imported honey bourbon. Riddle me that. Riddle me that one. There's one back at you.
Dude, I'm not trying to argue with you at all.
No. It's not at you. This is more for the listener. I want the listener to go look at Baron-Jäger and figure that one out. And then maybe this will get you some steamy comments or something like that.
You're smart to stay off Twitter. You're smart to stay off Twitter, by the way. Twitter's a hellscape, so.
Yeah, I never got into Reddit or Twitter. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff on there. Maybe even stuff about us. I don't know. I wouldn't know.
It's probably
barely got enough time for Instagram.
So I want to talk about the similarities between these last three whiskeys as well with that oak bill. I think it's really interesting to see, that you've kind of reserved this, what almost feels like it would be an LE or a top shelf product with the California oak bourbon. And these other ones that are higher proof, which we kind of typically assume or associate with being the ones that we're going to, pay more money for, seem to have more consistency with it because there is this same oak bill throughout. Talk about some of the experimentation that went on with developing the oak bill and why you wanted to reserve the California oak just for the one product.
Half the company at this point grew up, works in California. So California is near and dear to us. I was born here. My parents met at UCSD. I was born in San Francisco. I live in Los Angeles. I've kind of got connections and have spent a good amount of time in almost every corner of the state. And the Central Coast is really special. So my wife went to UCSB, my cousin went to UCSB, all my best friends went to UCSB. So I spent a lot of time going and visiting different people. My wife after college, she's going to listen to this and be like, you never came and saw me. I didn't even know you till after college, which is true. But other friends and people. So I've done a lot of wine tasting out there at Paso and San Ynez and San Luis Obispo and stuff. And great region for Pinot, great region for Cab. So we basically, when we formulate, to answer your first question, how we came up with that 40-40-20, we actually aged in like Gatorade jugs, our bourbon, our original mash bill. And then we had oak staves, and we actually like had to cut them down to like, they were sticking out of it. They're big.
Right. Yeah.
Cut them up with a hacksaw and put them all in there, let them age. And we were tasting them every day to kind of, okay, maybe it's time to pull the oak. It's starting to get a little oaky, this, that. Let's take it to the proof we want. And then let's blend. So one was 100% French oak. The other was 100% sherry. The other one was 100% ex-bourbon. And we made, 33, 33, 33, 40, 40, 20, 60, 20, 20. We made different blends. And as a group, as a company, we tried the different blends, and we landed on that oak bill. And it stuck. And then when we tried it on the rye, same thing. Like, damn, this oak bill works. It's just enough. It's not, the hint of sherry is really the secret sauce. It's 20% sherry. It's not too much, right? It's soft. It's there. It provides just enough fruit. The sherry's really sweet too. You can see the sugars on the inside of the stave after you let it dry out. They start to kind of crystallize. And it is a totally different level when you go like 80 or 100% sherry, which we tried. None of us loved it. None of us were in love with 100% sherry. And you'll see on our reserve oaks, we're really big on balance and really big on creating a whiskey that isn't just finishing something and that's it. And that's the difference between us and I would say every other finished whiskey, right? Every other finished whiskey is 100% finishing with that one barrel.
Right.
So if you see a tequila barrel finish or that, it's just 100% that barrel, like full force in your face, that flavor. And you lose some of what I would say made that original whiskey great. Or maybe you're hiding this may be the case, it may not be the case. That's for each, you could give one person, give 10 people one whiskey and half will like it and half won't. So that's a whole nother thing. But whatever the reasoning, we try to create consistent, continuous batches, and they're never actually consistent. They always kind of vary because we're super small. But we try to keep this one thing going because there's such balance in it. That hint of sherry, that oaky French oak with that little caramel note to it, the ex-bourbon stave with all those sort of marshmallowy vanilla flavors. There's so much vanilla in our whiskey. We love that vanilla flavor. There's almost like a birthday cake quality creaminess that comes out.
Absolutely.
And I love that cake batter sort of thing. Our 95 proof is really like that. Has more and more in recent batches really started to take on this cake batter profile that I've never used that description to describe other whiskeys. It's just we have our own whiskey, and because we're dabbling in different oaks at the same time with the same environment happening for the finishing process all at once, you get this balance that you just don't get when you go 100% one lever, one kind of barrel.
Sure.
Right. And that's just why I think it's kind of unique.
I think it shows too the influence that comes from your experimentation and your love for other whiskeys as well, not just relying upon the tradition of how bourbon is made, relying upon the tradition of how American rye is made, but that introduction of the sweetness from the sherry barrels, some of the drier French oak barrels as well. But it just feels like a good common ground or a good marriage between all of these different whiskey types, whiskey styles that can either bring people together or separate them because they prefer one thing over the other, right? But this does feel like a meeting ground between all of those. And it feels like a good way to introduce people slowly but surely into experimenting with other whiskeys. The thing that I've seen happen more and more recently too is introducing peat to rye and into bourbons as well, whether it's in the finishing or they use a barrel to, kind of bring that influence as well.
Do you have one you like, a peated bourbon?
Kings County's peated bourbon, I think, is quite good. Out of New York.
Okay.
Other than that, I've got a one from a peated rye that I've not had yet from Buzzard's Roost as of recording.
Buzzard's Roost.
But it's becoming more prominent. I'm curious if you see anything like that to as well as bring everybody to some sort of meeting space. Also, take it one step further and educate people, or even invite other people in with something like peat. We
did do a peat 2 years ago.
Did you?
We did the Isle of Peat. You can check that out. There may be a bottle or two floating around online or in local markets. We did and this is 2 years ago, and it was still stave finished, not barrel finished.
Right.
But we did what I called the single oak series, which was kind of a really weird and probably poor timing to have launched it, because we were still in transition from infused to broken barrel. But yeah, no, we did a 3 bottle series that I'll look back on and be proud of myself for attempting, but maybe not. I think I'm really hard on myself about those whiskeys, because we made too much of them. We thought it was like super limited, and I got my hands on enough oak for these batch sizes, but the batch sizes I think were too big for us at the time. I'm just saying, the relatively small batch sizes in the grand scheme. But I'm very critical of myself about all these things that went on around that project. But we did the cask of Amontillado, and we are still one of the few companies in the U.S. that have ever used Amontillado for a whiskey finish, Amontillado sherry cask. We did we actually got Lafroig barrels. We couldn't say it on the label or anything, but surprise, it was Lafroig. 15-year-old Lafroig barrels that we got. We got 4 of those, we finished a peated. We finished a wheat single malt blend that we actually followed up with an additional sherry finish and called that the Fenwalker. And then we had the Mizunara, which was just a blend of corn whiskeys finished in Mizunara. And what I would say about peated bourbons, I'm curious to try both the ones you mentioned. I have not had them, but to date, I have never had or never been able to create, and this may be just a bit about me on blending, but corn and peat are mortal enemies. They do not go together, in my opinion. So I would love to find and try a peated bourbon, but I would reserve peat, in my personal opinion. It belongs in the malts. It belongs with the wheats and the ryes.
Right.
Something about corn. I tried so many different ways to make a corn whiskey with those peated Scotch barrels when I first got them, and I was sampling some staves.
Right.
And it was some of the worst stuff I've ever tasted. And in every ratio and in every sort of dilution and at every proof, it was just awful. And then we're like, all right, this isn't working. Let's call MGP and get some samples of some single malt. And those whiskeys, by the way, incorporate a lot of whiskey that was not from Green River. And so we got some MGP single malt, and we dropped a little bit of that peated cask in there. And it was incredible. It was one of the best things we ever tried. And we're like, okay, well, obviously there's that. Like, let's just stick with single malt. There's a reason they peat single malts, and it's not a bourbon thing. So we actually got a double gold medal on that Isle of Peat. We got a silver medal on the Amontillado, even though it was by far a long shot the most popular and the quickest to sell out. And we got 95 points on the Mizunara, 95 points. So that was a good one.
That's awesome. I apologize. I didn't know that you guys had already done something with Pete.
No, it kind of came and went, and it's not really prominent on our website. It's kind of tucked away, but the information's there, and there were links to buy them now. And I know some California retailers still have them online, so you can ship. In most states, search Single Oak Series, Broken Barrel. You find one, grab it. We stopped making those 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, Seth, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I do want to touch on just one more thing, and it's the sore thumb out of the bunch in the best way possible. The rye. The rye is so in and of itself a very unique product. I mean, it is so bright for a rye, so citrusy for a rye, and I can't help but wonder that had to have been a part of the finishing process, right? I mean, it's a 95.5 rye. I mean,
95.5. Yeah. It is not from Indiana. It is not a MGP rye. I think a lot of distilleries have adopted that mash bill as their own because it produces a familiar flavor that you look for in rye. And I like ryes that aren't 95.5 as well. And if I were to do another rye whiskey, I would absolutely make sure it was not a 95.5 just to change things up.
Sure.
Yeah, that oak barrel, really, the rye whiskey is special. I love our rye whiskey. I think it's by far, I mean, there aren't a lot of 105 proof rye whiskeys in a bottle like the ones we're putting out for $30, $35.
Yeah.
You just can't find it. I mean, you've got Sazerac, Overholt, Rittenhouse, and I'm trying to think of another rye in that price point.
Old Forester.
Bullet. Yeah, Forester and Bullet.
Yeah.
And even none of those are over 105.
No.
I think 100 is the highest of any of those. So for cocktails, I mean, to get a craft produced whiskey, a rye whiskey with that proof on it, to make a cocktail with, to make your Manhattans or whatever. I mean, it's with that little sherry backbone, your Manhattans. Awesome. Like absolutely. I'm tooting my own horn. It's a great rye whiskey that I'm very proud of. So, and honestly, if I didn't have so many other different spirits to drink all the time, I would drink so much more of it. But I'm cursed with the job of tasting new stuff all the time. So it's a tough job. Someone's got to do it, man. Someone's got to do it. You and I. We're the unlucky ones.
I can't complain about it. I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Mike and everybody at Broken Barrel for sending me the samples as well. Where can people find you on social media?
Instagram's our main thing. We're pretty inactive on Facebook. So Instagram @Broken Barrel, @Infuse Spirits. That's Infuse Spirits with an S. Same thing. Just Google Broken Barrel Infuse Spirits. It will come up. We've got plenty of stuff out there, and that's us.
Awesome. Well, once again, Seth, thank you so much, man. We'll catch up with you soon as well.
Yes. All right, Perry. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
My thanks again to Seth, everybody who helped out with getting this interview set up as well. Had so much fun talking about these really cool, really different, really interesting methods of creating bourbon, creating whiskey. What are your all's thoughts? Are you more inclined to pick up Broken Barrel now that you've heard from the guy who makes it? Are you at least more curious in trying it? Let me know. Send me a tweet. Send me an email at mybourbonpod. This is mybourbonshop@gmail.com. If you have some follow-up questions, maybe we'll address it on this week's stream. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode as well. But regardless, thank you again, Seth. All right. Let's talk about some tips and bits before we get out of here. And I got just one this week because it's impossible for me to not talk about this. My favorite show is back. Ted Lasso. Jason Sudeikis on Apple TV. It's just hands down everything that I want a TV show to be. And I mean, I don't really have that much love for sports, but in this case, it makes me feel closer to the sport itself in terms of soccer, football, however you want to call it. And I find Jason Sudeikis in this show so endearing and so lovable, and I cannot get enough of it. Only one episode of season 2 is out, but everything from season 1 is on Apple TV or Apple Plus or whatever the heck it's called. I don't even really know anymore. I just kind of I subscribe to it, and it's one of those things where I would subscribe to it just for that show, and it would be totally worth it to me. So I think that does it. Thank you all so much for listening this week. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at PureRaider1492 on all social media channels. If you want to follow the show itself, it's at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcatcher app, and we will read that out here on the show if you would like for us to, if not. But that is a super great way for other people to find the show, pushes us up in the charts when people search for bourbon in their favorite podcatcher app. And tell your friends about the show. Please. That's a great way to get the word out if they like bourbon and like podcasts. Even if they don't, force them to listen to it. Don't do that. We don't endorse that here at Timbip. That's not nice. Don't do that to your friends. You can find all of our apparel and merchandise at bourbonshop.threadless.com. You can send questions or comments to thisismybourbonshop@gmail.com. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/thisismybourbonpodcast. We are on the way to 1,000 subs. I'm super, super excited to get there. Once we do, we'll be able to do some awesome, some more lucrative things with that channel, I would say. But I do have a new episode or new video coming out very soon, probably within the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. And last but not least, patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show. Really does mean a lot to those of you who are already patrons and to those of you who are considering doing it. If you need a little extra push, $5 gets you some bonus content, and the higher tier patrons are also going to get first shot at getting our next barrel pick, which you are going to find out much more about here in the next few weeks. That does it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again to Seth for spending the time with me recording this episode. We'll see you all next week, but until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.